Welcome to Defeat Your Cravings, hosted by Dr. Glenn Livingston, PhD. Glenn has held his doctorate in psychology for more than 30 years and is also a former multi-million-dollar consultant to the big food industry and uses his experience to help you defeat your cravings. This show will help you to focus on dramatically reducing cravings and leave the diet mentality behind, so you can more easily and effortlessly achieve your health, fitness, and body composition goals. Please remember, no doctor-patient relationship is created via this show, and you are responsible for confirming any changes to your diet, health, or psychological routines with an appropriately licensed professional before implementing them. Now, before we get started, if you haven't yet downloaded the free smartphone app to access dozens of these recordings all in one place, as well as to avail yourself of a confidential community for support, motivation, and assistance, please visit the podcast link on defeatyourcravings.com as soon as possible. And now, here's your host, Dr. Glenn Livingston.
Hey, it's Dr. Glenn Livingston.
And Dr. Howard Jacobson.
And we wanted to have an interesting talk today about just a few things that you can do to tweak your ability to maintain success with healthy eating and healthy exercise and all kinds of other healthy habits when you have the motivation, when you're moving forward. So, Howie, I got the first idea from you. I was reading your book, Sick to Fit, which I highly endorse, by the way. And one of the interesting things you said in there was that people go through these periods of high motivation. I mean, sometimes it's hard for people to find any motivation, but when they find the motivation to make a change or to get healthy in some way, that the odds are that that level of motivation is going to wane over time. It's not going to last. But that actual action is a product of motivation and ability. And I think the example you gave was you don't really need to have an extraordinarily high level of motivation to brush your teeth because you've got a very strong ability to brush your teeth. It's just built in, or to wipe your tush or anything like that, because you just know how to do that as part of your daily routine, and there's not really any kind of a learning curve you have to go through to do that. But the motivation to change your eating, behave in a new way around food, or more consistently in a new way around food, that's different. And so what you said was, since ability lasts and motivation doesn't, when you have motivation, you should use that time to increase your ability. Am I quoting that right, or would you tweak that in any way?
Yeah. The first thing is I suddenly thought of a product when you mentioned like wiping your tush and brushing your teeth in the same sentence. What about like an ultrasonic tush wiper? There
should be an ultrasonic tush wiper.
I'm just making a note of that for my side hustle. Anyway.
Let's run to GoDaddy and get the domain name right away.
Yeah. Yeah. What was your question? No. So this concept comes, I took a course with BJ Fogg of Stanford University, and that was sort of his insight, is that motivation is very fickle. And so when we depend on motivation, we're depending on something that we really can't rely upon. And if you've ever had the experience of, being madly in love with someone and then looking back after the dopamine and the oxytocin initial hit wears off and you realize, they fart in bed.
Not me. I mean, I don't do that, but yeah.
No, we're talking about other people.
Other people, yeah.
They eat the plums that were in the refrigerator that you were probably saving for lunch. They do all these things. When we first are in the blush of infatuation, we don't even notice or we think is adorable. But then when that wears off, and we can't imagine during that infatuation that we're ever going to find any fault with this person.
My honey's bed farts are so cute. I know what you mean.
So the same is true when we get motivated and excited. Like I can't tell you how many times I did something for 3 days in a row and I was like, wow, I finally nailed it. Like I'm going to do this for the rest of my life. Like this is it. Like all those other times in the past, I wasn't thinking straight. I wasn't doing it right. I wasn't committed. But now this is smooth sailing.
Yeah.
And it's just not true because there's going to come a day when you just don't feel like doing it. So on that day, hopefully, whatever habit it is going to be as easy as toothbrushing. Either because you've practiced it enough, you've gained skill, or you've tweaked your environment so that it's the default. It's the thing you do without struggle or effort. What I've learned is when I'm so high on motivation, like, to take that metaphor, like I'm totally in love with this person. Let's go to couples counseling right now.
Let's develop as much communication skill as we possibly can so that when we're not feeling so high that the skill remains. And I think the key is that you can do it even when you don't feel like it. change is easy when you do feel like it, but what really separates the men from the boys or the women from the girls, and where the rubber meets the road, if I can think of any other analogies, I will. What really distinguishes long-lasting change is the ability to do something when you don't feel like doing it. I taught myself to floss my teeth. First, I had to learn how to floss, but I just didn't feel like it most of the time. And so at first I do my top teeth on Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, and my bottom teeth on Tuesday, Thursday, and Saturday. And on Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, I'd say, I'm just doing my top teeth because F my bottom teeth. That's why. And then I do it on Tuesday, Thursday, and Saturday because F my top teeth. And eventually it became such a routine and I was so good at it that it didn't matter whether I felt like it or I didn't. I could just floss every day. That's what you're talking about, is to develop the skill when the motivation is high so that it's going to become second nature, like flossing your teeth or wiping your tush.
Right. And realistically, like there may be habits that you can get to smoothly. Like while the motivation lasts, you can develop such ability or create such a nurturing environment that by the time the motivation wears out, you're good. But there's a lot of other things where the motivation is like a Looney Tunes character. You're going to run off the cliff and you're going to be pedaling your legs, and then you're going to look down. And all of a sudden, there's no motivation. At that point, you plummet, right? Before everything is all set up.
Maybe you could think of an example, and I could think of an example just to drive it home. So, for example, I have been pushing my food plan to another level. And before I say this, I want everybody to know that there's no reason whatsoever you have to eat like I do. I've been doing this for 8 or 9 years, and the longer that I do it, the more I find that industrial foods just leave me. The trade-offs involved with processed foods and most everything besides whole, fresh, ripe, raw, natural foods, it's just not worth it for me. So I really evolved to what most people would think is a very extreme diet, but I'm very clear on my nutrition, and I've checked it out both with dietitians and with chronometer.com and that kind of thing. So even though it sounds extreme, I'm actually very well nourished. But I've been trying to push it to another level where I am not really having any dried fruit and where I'm having much lower fat than I normally do. So maybe an avocado a week or something like that. And I felt particularly motivated to do it. I just moved to Florida. I'm very excited about being able to get more sun. I'm in a healthy relationship and kind of excited about that. And she's someone who eats like I do, and she actually coaches people to eat like I do. And so I've got all this sudden support and impetus to really move things forward. And I've taken the time now to read more, and I've actually been asking her all sorts of questions about what she knows. And it's the first time I feel like I'm learning about diet and nutrition in the longest time, because I've read so much and I felt like I knew so much. But I actually learned more, like really subtle things about what type of seaweed I should have to increase my mineral content and support my thyroid, and what type of vegetables I should be eating to be ultimately anti-inflammatory. And sadly learned that I shouldn't be having as many tomatoes as I was having, because I really love tomatoes. All those type of things, but I've taken the time to educate myself because I didn't think of it like this before, but I think intuitively I knew that if I wanted to get to this new level and sustain it, that this motivation will not last. There'll be a honeymoon period. And I remember when I first moved to an apartment building with a view of Central Park in New York City, that it was a real high for about 3 months, and then it started to look like a postcard. And I think I'm at this age better able to cultivate gratefulness and maintain a positive frame of mind like that. But even so, I think that eventually Florida might seem like a postcard. So I'm trying to take the high that I'm on now from having made the move and leverage it as much as I can. So is that what you're talking about?
Yeah, that being sanguine, being realistic, and recognizing that like what I'm feeling now and what I'm noticing now and what seems important to me now is not what's going to seem important next week, not what I'm going to feel next month, and not what I'm going to think about next year. In fact, I'm thinking about a quote by Danny Kahneman, the Nobel Prize winning behavioral economist, who was asked, and I'm going to screw up the quote a little bit, but I'll give you the essence of it. He was asked by someone, if you could tell one sentence to the world that would make the world a better place, would make people happier, what would it be? And he basically replied, nothing that you're thinking about is as important as you think it is when you're thinking about it. So to be a grown-up is to recognize that what I'm feeling now is going to change. And so let me take those steps. And one of them, we alluded to this a little bit before we started recording, is this is something I learned from my co-author, Josh Lajani, which is like people would come to us after the motivation has worn off. It's like they've seen a ghost. They're dispirited. They think it's all over. Like, oh, yeah, I'm sort of still doing it, but I just don't feel it anymore. Like I was running 5 days a week and now I barely jogged twice in the last 2 weeks and I don't feel like it. They're terrified that this is going to be the way of things. And what we realized was, and what Josh pointed out, is you still have a choice. And at that moment, you can choose to say that, well, my motivation is gone and I need it to come back. Or you can say, this is the moment I've been waiting for. This is the moment where I get to prove to myself who I am, what my word is worth, right? Like you knew this day would come. Everything you've been doing has been preparing for the day when you just have zero motivation. Now you can win the mother of all fight-throughs and go and do it anyway. The way Josh described it, it was like when those days came, he was excited on this meta level. Like he was motivated to go and do the thing that he had no motivation to do.
I love it. That's the moment of truth is, can you do it when you don't feel like it?
Right.
Can you talk a little bit more about the concept of a fight-through? What do you mean by a fight-through?
Most of my good ideas are stolen from somewhere. My intent is to cite and give credit. This comes from a book called Organize Tomorrow Today, and my eyesight is not good enough to see the author's names from my desk to my bookcase, but I'm sure there's only one book by that title. And they talk about the 3 stages of a habit. And the first stage they call the honeymoon period, right? Which is what we're talking about when we're so motivated and butterflies and rainbows around our toothbrush and our floss. And the third stage is second nature, where it's just something we do and we can't ever imagine not doing it, right? So the toothbrushing, the tush wiping. The middle part, they call fight through. And they say people fear the time when, okay, I have a craving, right? Like when people say go on a diet, they're very often like, oh, I'm so strong. They don't feel the cravings. But then they're at a party or a Christmas gathering, or they go out to lunch with mates, or the big game is on and they're triggered to call the same pizza place or the same buffalo wings place that they've always catered from. And they think, okay, now it's over. Now what do I do? Because the honeymoon's over. This is the fight through period. So the first thing is it's inevitable. The second thing is it's the pathway to second nature. Like everybody wants to get to second nature. And this is how you get to second nature, by going out and embracing fight throughs. The way I think of it is a lot of people in our program come back in dazed one day and they got mugged. I was doing so well. And then ... There was the Golden Arches, or I was in the produce section and they set up like somebody handing out cinnamon bun pieces in the produce section. And of course it smelled so good. And I had one, and then I had 4, and then I bought a box of them. They feel like they've been mugged. So now their strategy is, well, I can't go back to that supermarket anymore, or I can't go to the break room at work anymore, or I can't go have a drink with my buddies after work anymore because those places are too dangerous now. You're afraid of the bad neighborhoods. When you think of it as a fight through, let's go out and pick fights. We're going to go have a cage match with that pizza.
Yes.
Right. So we're no longer the victim, and we still may lose. Every fight, pro fight, somebody loses, right? But it feels different if you lose going in and knowing like you're giving it your best and you're doing it for a purpose. So like whoever is the heavyweight champion of the world in whatever martial art, whatever pugilistic league, they didn't get a chance at the title like Rocky. Their name wasn't picked out of the hat because it sounded good. They fought at every level, and they lost a bunch and they won a bunch, and every fight prepared them to go to the next level. That's what I mean by fight through. It's this period by which you're intentionally training yourself and putting yourself in positions where you might get bloodied so that you can increase your ability.
I love it. And I've got a couple little tweaks on that. I understand this is the difference between cultivating fear versus cultivating confidence. And first of all, you can only extinguish a craving by having a craving. It's the way our brains work. We can't just cut out our reptilian brain or have an operation on our neurology that will eliminate the pathway that was there before. The pathway has to be activated in order to be extinguished. And so every craving is actually an opportunity. And it's an opportunity for self-love versus self-harm. And if you love yourself and you stick with your plan, then that pathway gets a little bit weaker and you've taken advantage of that opportunity. And towards that end, I really think that people should feel confident going anywhere that they want to go. I had a big problem with chocolate bars in Starbucks, but I still go to Starbucks. And there was a period when I got frightened of Starbucks and I wouldn't go. But then I realized, well, but a lot of my friends want to meet at Starbucks. And at the time I liked drinking coffee. And, then it was tea. And now I just like the environment. Why can't I go to Starbucks if I really want to go to Starbucks? I'm not a weakling. I have a healthy appetite that's been corrupted by industry. And I'm not going to live a smaller and smaller life and cower in fear against the biological urges of my own body. I'm not afraid of my testicles. There are a lot of attractive people out there, but I'm not afraid of the urges that my testicles create because I know that I have full control and can dedicate when those urges are expressed and when they're not. And, with like one particular person, I'm not afraid of, oh my God, what if I meet an attractive person? It's okay. I live my life in the world. I'm not afraid of my bladder. I don't stay home all the time just in case I won't be able to get to a bathroom. I look at my cravings as a sign of health. It's just that they might have been misdirected and misprogrammed. And when people talk about needing to have all the pig slop in their house in a separate cabinet or maybe with a lock on it or something like that, I tell them it's okay in the very beginning if that's what you need to get started, but you should really think about it like training wheels. And ultimately, I want you to be able to face it down and fight it and win. And so just because you had a war with a bagel and you lost doesn't mean that you're always going to lose or always have to lose the war with a bagel. The last thing I want to say, Howie, is that while it's simultaneously true that people might require several attempts in order to master their impulses, it's also true that the idea that you might lose is a pig squeal in and of itself. We need to go into the fight confident that we're the winner and that we can knock out the pig in one punch. We are more or less totally agreed on what a fight through is and that we're looking for the opportunities to have fight throughs. And there are times when I have even sought that out myself. Like I've, walked into Starbucks just to practice. And I've looked at the chocolate. I got this from Jack Trimpey. You can look at it from your vantage point, and then you can look at it from the pig's vantage point, and you can go back and forth between the two. And if you do that enough, so I'll look at the chocolate and I'll think, oh my God, that looks amazing. A little bit's not going to hurt. I've worked out enough today. I'll be okay with it. I know I can go back to eating well tomorrow. I want it, I want it, I want it, I want it. And then I'll switch back to myself and I say, your heart's going to be revving up and you're going to be smack back dab in the addiction and you're going to want to eat something salty and starchy to slow you down after you have the chocolate, and then it's going to start the whole binging cycle, and then you're going to be miserable, and then you'll be a fraud, and on and on and on. And then I'll just go back and forth between the two. And then finally I realize if I have the power to go back and forth between those different mindsets, then I have the power to choose. And obviously, I'm the one that's moving back and forth. I'm the one that's controlling my brain. So I'm going to choose to let the craving go. And now I've just extinguished the craving. And so I would walk in and elicit the opportunity for a fight through. I would go back and forth between those two mindsets. And then that's how I would win the game and extinguish the craving. That's my version of a fight through.
Right. I love that. What sounds like the difference is, so we tell people like aim to win like 90, 95%. Eventually you want to get to the place where you're making progress. So we tell people like be okay with the fact that you could lose once in a while. You always want to go in a winner because you do have that kind of control. What I think we're telling people is like don't avoid it because you're afraid you might lose.
Yeah, that's true. Don't develop a phobia, right?
Right. So I think they're slightly different approaches, but I think we're certainly saying the same thing.
Well, and I want people to forgive themselves with dignity if they do make a mistake, but I want them to go in with the attitude that they never will again.
Mm-hmm. Right. I think we may have a teeny little philosophical or tactical.
We can't be friends anymore, Howie.
I was prepared for you to say that because there's a poem I would like to read to you right now based on something you said a little. I'm going to hold off on the poem for a few seconds just to reiterate two things you said that I want to remember. One is that you have to feel the craving to extinguish the craving, which is fantastic. And your distinction about walking through the world in confidence versus fear, I think is a beautiful encapsulation of what I said rather long-windedly about cage matches and muggings. So I'm going to steal that as well. And when you talked about like the walking into Starbucks and consciously having the pig debate, like pig versus self, what I thought of was baseball. And in baseball, the home team always gets to bat last. And so you're the home team. So doesn't matter what the pig says, you always can win.
You get to make the decision. Things are wired in your favor.
Yeah, whatever the pig says, then you say, okay, well, the pig just said that, so we obviously need another round. So I get to rebut. The pig never gets the last word.
Gotcha. So where's my home?
Okay, here it is. It's by Isaac Asimov. Tell me why the stars do shine. Tell me why the ivy twines. Tell me what makes skies so blue, and I'll tell you why I love you. Nuclear fission makes stars to shine. Tropisms make the ivy twine. Raleigh scattering makes skies so blue. Testicular hormones are why I love you.
Dude. Okay, I guess we should end there. Was there more you wanted to say?
No, that was it.
That was funny. Thank you, buddy. This is a great call.
Cool, thanks.
And that brings us to the end of today's broadcast of Defeat Your Cravings, hosted by Dr. Glenn Livingston. Now, if you'd like to find out more about the products and services Dr. Glenn offers to help you dramatically reduce your cravings and stop overeating in 90 days or less, please visit defeatyourcravingscoaching.com. That's defeatyourcravingscoaching.com. Thanks.